Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu Breathe, Feel and Grow, dem Podcast für dein erfülltes Leben in deinem eigenen Flow. Mein Name ist Svenja Tasler, ich bin Life- and Breathwork Coach und Host und Gastgeberin dieses Podcasts, in dem dich Impulse, Inspirationen und Tools rund um deinen Atem und um dein inneres Wachstum erwarten. Mit ganz viel Bewusstsein für dein Nervensystem und deine Gefühle und einem Fokus auf Empowerment, Embodiment und deinen persönlichen Flow. Ich freue mich so sehr, dass du bei der heutigen Folge im Breathe, Feel and Grow Podcast wieder eingeschaltet hast, denn ich habe meine erste Gästin in dieser zweiten Staffel dabei und ja, ich freue mich einfach unglaublich dolle, meine wirklich sehr geschätzte Kollegin Hannah Goodman zum Flow Talk bei mir begrüßen zu dürfen. Hannah ist eine Kollegin von Breathing Space, die selbst auch Breathwork Coach und Trainerin ist, die selbst auch eine Ausbildung zum Breathwork Coach anbietet, mit ihrer Kollegin Hannah zusammen, die gemeinsam das Unternehmen Grounded Life gegründet haben. Und ja, wir kennen uns über unsere gemeinsame Leidenschaft für Breathwork, über unsere gemeinsame Arbeit bei Breathing Space. Und Hannah und ich haben in unserem Gespräch natürlich über Breathwork gesprochen, aber auch über Hannahs persönlichen Weg mit ihrem Atem und über die verschiedenen Projekte, an denen sie mitarbeitet. Und dann sind wir in ganz, ganz viele verschiedene Richtungen abgedriftet. Wir haben über die Prägung durch gesellschaftliche Konditionierungen gesprochen, darüber, wie wir alle als Individuen unsere persönlichen Definitionen von Erfolg finden dürfen und müssen, aber auch, warum wir in unserer Gesellschaft den Fokus häufig viel zu sehr auf uns als Individuen legen, statt auf das Kollektiv und auf unsere Gemeinschaft und wie wir dadurch die Verbindung zur Natur verloren haben und wie unser Weg zur Heilung und in die Verbindung wirklich wieder zurückführt über kollektive Arbeit. Wir haben über sichere Orte gesprochen beim Breathwork, aber auch in anderen Rahmen, wie wir sichere Orte kreieren können, aber auch was es eigentlich bedeutet, einen sicheren Ort zu haben und wann wir sie vielleicht nicht kreieren können und wie wichtig die aber sind, damit wir individuell, aber auch kollektiv wachsen und heilen können. Wir haben über die Wichtigkeit von Ressourcen gesprochen und das ist ein Thema, über das sowohl Hannah als auch ich beide sehr passioniert sind. Wir haben über Ressourcen im Breathwork gesprochen, aber auch darüber, wie man Ressourcen im Allgemeinen, im Alltag nutzen kann, um sein Nervensystem zu regulieren. Und dann hatte ich das große Vergnügen und bin sehr dankbar dafür, dass Hannah uns am Ende des Gesprächs durch eine 10-minütige Atemübung geführt hat, beziehungsweise führen wird. Und ich möchte dich einladen, dir diese 10 Minuten am Ende wirklich zu gönnen und ganz in Ruhe bei dir anzukommen und diese Atemübung mitzumachen. Unser Gespräch findet auf Englisch statt, weil Hannah aus England kommt. Ich hoffe, dass das kein Problem ist und ich freue mich, wenn du trotzdem dran bleibst und dir dieses wundervolle, tiefe Gespräch anhörst, in dem wirklich so viele Themen angesprochen wurden und wir auf so viele Dinge eingegangen sind. Und es ist einfach, ja, wir sind von einem Thema zum anderen gehüpft und ich freue mich einfach wahnsinnig dolle, dass Hannah sich die Zeit genommen hat. Bevor wir jetzt aber in das Gespräch mit Hannah einsteigen, möchte ich dich noch einmal auf ein Angebot von mir aufmerksam machen, was ich in den letzten Wochen auch schon erwähnt habe. Der Reroute and Resource Online-Kurs startet Anfang Oktober, nämlich am 3.10. in die zweite Runde. Die erste Runde hat ja schon im April, Mai stattgefunden und es sind 6 Plätze frei, um mit mir in diesem 6-wöchigen Online-Gruppenkurs auf eine sehr praktische Erkundungstour durch deine inneren Ressourcen zu gehen. Und du merkst schon, es geht wieder um Ressourcen in dem Gespräch mit Hannah. Heute geht es auch um Ressourcen, weil das Thema einfach so unglaublich wichtig ist, weil ich glaube, dass das einer der Anker und für uns wichtigsten Themen ist, jetzt gerade, aber auch in Zukunft, um mit Stress im Alltag besser umgehen zu können, um mit Herausforderungen sowohl in unserem privaten Leben, aber auch auf einer vielleicht eher kollektiven oder globalen Ebene oder einfach nur auf einer gesellschaftlichen Ebene, um damit besser umgehen zu können. Und Im Reroute and Resource Kurs, der im Oktober startet, gehen wir auf eine gemeinsame Erkundungstour deiner Ressourcen. Wir schauen uns an, welche Stärken du hast, wie du die fördern kannst und welche Ressourcen du für dich persönlich nutzen kannst, also welche nicht für mich passen oder für irgendjemanden anders, sondern wirklich welche Ressourcen für dich passen, damit du mehr Ausgeglichenheit und innere Ruhe im Alltag wahrnehmen kannst. Der Kurs geht über 6 Wochen, es wird 6 Live-Sessions geben. Ich habe es schon gesagt, es ist eine kleine Runde, es gibt maximal 6 Plätze, sodass wir ganz in dieser kleinen, intimen Runde auch auf tiefe Reisen gehen können. Und du findest alle Informationen zu meinem Kurs in den Shownotes und auf meiner Website. Und wenn du Interesse an dem Kurs hast, dann melde dich total gerne bei mir und komm mit mir auf diese Reise. Und damit möchte ich uns jetzt auch direkt in das Gespräch mit Hannah rüberführen. Wie gesagt, es findet auf Englisch statt. Ich wünsche dir ganz viel Spaß, genieß das bisschen über eine Stunde, was Hannah und ich zusammen gesprochen haben und lass uns hinterher total gerne wissen, wie es dir gefallen hat und was dich besonders in dem Gespräch bewegt hat.
I'm really excited that today I've got another wonderful, amazing woman with me on the podcast. Welcome, Hannah. I'm so pleased to have you here with me and to speak to you today. Would you like to introduce yourself to us and just speak a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, maybe what's important to know about you?
Hello. Yeah, it's lovely to be here, Svenja. Thank you for having me. My name is Hannah Goodman. I am a breathwork facilitator. I'm located in the UK, in Brighton, in Sussex, and I live here with my husband and my dog, and I've been doing breathwork for a while now. Did my first training in, I think the graduation was 2016, and I know we're going to talk about lots of sort of lovely things. So I'm not sure what people need to know apart from that little checklist of who I am, where I am, and how I am. I'm feeling very happy to be here.
Yeah, so whatever you want to share is obviously fine, and whatever else outside of the breathwork life we're living is also welcome. But since breathwork is the part that's most present, and that's how we got to know each other as well, why don't we start there and just go into how did you get to breathwork? So you just said 2016 was your facilitator training, but how did it all start? I love stories about how people found breathwork.
How they found their breath. Yeah, okay. I rewind back a bit further than 2016. I lived in London for many years, probably about 20 years. In the end, we just moved to Brighton 2 years ago, and I worked in the London. I worked in advertising, kind of hectic lifestyle, and there was a moment where I was like, "This is not it. It's not it. There must be more." There was a lot of high anxiety, a lot of stress, a lot of burning the candle at both ends, and just a lot of unanswered questions around why I was the way I was and responding to life in the way that I was responding to life, and what was happening internally in mental health, like emotional health, physical health. And it sort of set me on a bit of a journey. Actually, one of the main points was there were so many things that I wanted to do in life, and I kept self-sabotaging them, or I kept going in for them and then feeling quite traumatized because I didn't have the confidence to kind of like follow it through, or there were high expectations because people thought I could do something, and then I'd arrive and just get really introvert and scared, and was living in a very heightened sense of fear when there was really nothing dangerous that I could understand or see. So this started me off of like, what's going on? Why is it like that? Why am I the only one really holding myself back from all these amazing things that I really want to do? And that sent me on a path of exploration. I remember the first book I ever read that had anything to do with any sort of consciousness, expanding consciousness, or being conscious, was Power of Now, many, many years ago, and a book called Emotional Intelligence on the flight to Thailand that I went, to go and explore. And then I did a yoga teacher training in Ibiza. And then I was like, right, I'm going to be a yoga teacher, and worked really, really, really hard at trying to make that work. I came back to London to create the business of yoga, and all the passion and all the kind of connection and all the yumminess that I had cultivated suddenly kind of fizzled out in this quite what felt like a hard edge, trying to make business work, get people bums on seats in classes, and this fire that was kind of lit kind of fizzled. So I was like, right, okay, this is not working. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to Bali. I had a friend that lived in Bali. I'm going to go and live there. So I went off to live in Bali, and I really threw myself into the community of yoga. I just was like, I'll do it. It was really, and it really showed me, if you really want to do something and you're really focused, things really move. And I don't think I had that before. I was always very much rabbit in headlights. I want to do that and that and that and that. And it was always quite dilapidating in why aren't I moving forward? So it was an interesting moment of like, I'm going to make this work. And it did, in the sense of like being part of the yoga community in Bali for a little bit. As I was leaving, or maybe towards the end, my dear friend took me to a breathwork session. This is rather a long intro story. My friend took me to a breathwork session. Come along, she said. And it was a wonderful practitioner called Monica, who worked with the Alchemy of Breath at that time. She's independent from them, but I know that she trained with them. And yeah, it was there. And in that session, yeah, I definitely had a moment of, I'm going to be doing this forever. I'm just going to be inquiring into the breath forever. I thought, there's not going to be a moment where I'm like, oh, yeah, what more can I learn about my breath? It wasn't like the big, people always say it like it's this big aha moment, and it was, but it was lots of little aha moments within that session. And then finishing that session and not actually being able to get on my moped, because I was actually sort of shaking in this weird state, and just being like, how the hell did my breath only do that? And yeah, it grabbed my attention. And I'm recalling now these lovely memories. Then I looked around for schools. I had a bit more time in Bali. I was like, I'm going to train, we're going to do that. And I met Anthony with the Alchemy of Breath, and he actually was the only, I didn't have any money, to be quite blunt. He was the only person that was like, let's talk and see if we can exchange some services. I had marketing, under my belt, and events organization and stuff like that. And I went to his place in Ubud and sat and we chatted with him and Amy. And that started quite a long relationship with me working with Alchemy for the next, best part of 4 or 5 years. So yeah, it all started there. That was fun to remember.
Oh, lovely. Thank you for sharing that. And how lovely to hear the story of how Anthony and you started talking about what's possible, and not just stopping at, I don't have money for this course, I can't do it, but actually getting in a conversation and finding different ways. I love that.
Yeah, me too, because it felt accessible when there was, I understand people run their businesses like they want to, and to have strict structure of how your business runs is wonderful, but to also know that there was an opportunity for me to really go somewhere where I wanted to go in exchange for the experience, and what I did have, which wasn't just in the financial money, it gave me an opportunity, and here I am today, and will ever be grateful for that opportunity. I mean, I worked hard for it, but it was a door opening.
Yeah, I get that. And where did it lead you now? So you started with Alchemy of Breath, and what happened then?
Well, quite ironically, I did the training with Anthony, and it was more about the inner work than wanting to become the facilitator. And I was very much part of the kind of crew and the co-creation of the events and the business growing and stuff like that. So it felt like I was in it, but I never wanted to be a facilitator. The thought of talking in front of people and not going completely red and shaking and, having some strange fit, it was just too much. And so I just made a decision of it's okay, Hannah, you don't have to be a facilitator. You don't have to stand up there, and you don't have to do it. And I kind of surrendered. The more I surrendered into that, then the more, because that was very stressful to think at the end of this training, I'm going to be expected to be an authority of something, to be a what do they call, public figure, or it's which is silly because that's actually not even true, but that was the fear. I'm going to be seen, I'm going to have to be seen. So take that away, I'm like, no, you just be part of the team. I angeled for such a long time, and what was really amazing is I got to angel with Anthony for many years, and the events that I helped organize were anywhere from in lots of different countries in the world, and they were also anywhere from 30 people to 150 people, at festivals, at different places, at retreats, in London a lot of the time. And yeah, so the experience, I was just happy with that. And then one day, we say one day because it makes the story, but I'm sure it wasn't one day, but, then there was a period of time where the stepping up really was pulling and it just would have felt more strange to not have stepped up to start leading than it would have to stay, because the experience sort of overtook my fear of the being seen. So it was a really nice organic way of growing, and that is why I formed and now co-create and run the company Grounded Life with Hannah, because it's all about growing organically. And if you don't feel like, when you're growing, that's going to be sustainable for you, then you need to ground. And that is all about coming into the roots and grounding actually anyway before we grow, because they're like reciprocal energies that need to go in opposite directions in order to have a strong structure. And I created that because I've lived it, and it felt organic and safe for me, more secure. I was more empowered doing it that way.
Thank you for sharing that. And I feel like that's such an important point, because I feel in our society, especially in maybe it's my bubble, like the breathwork, spirituality, personal development bubble, it feels like everybody is pushing to move quicker, and that's actually society in general. But that's not just my bubble. But it feels like there's a lot of push to, you need to grow and you need to get on top of everything. You need to ahead, but you need to move forward and get your shit together and just move ahead and push through whatever blockages you have. While what you are saying sounds much more also nervous system friendly, listening to your worries, and your nervous system obviously was activated when thinking about stepping up and running sessions yourself. So you took a step which felt more comfortable for yourself, and then naturally your nervous system the comfort zone of your nervous system grew, and so naturally it happened, and you were able to step up without pushing yourself out of your comfort zone too much and
absolutely
struggle.
And the comfort zone, I did push myself out of my comfort zone many, many times, and to others it might not have looked like I was, because to them, I have no idea, but I'm just having a perspective of maybe outside of myself, because it might not have seemed to them that was particularly, a huge step. But for me, I kept doing that, and I kept getting what felt like very burnt internally and then really having to, and I also didn't really understand at that point the absolute importance of self-resourcing, which I know we're going to go on and talk about. So it was very much okay, stepping out, and then again, and I didn't actually know why or what was going on. It was just the lived experience, and until I was okay, this is not working, this is causing this is not working, so something needs to change. But what you were just describing there about this, you just described basically a business model of the society we live in. It's it's quite linear. You start here, you want to get there's the goal, go for it, and that equals sort of success. And it's an outdated model that I know that there's lots of amazing variations of now, but I feel like we're still quite conditioned in that, even if that isn't forced upon us, we still kind of have that kind of conditioning of oh no, that's what it is. And so it's the unlearning of that's actually not how I have to do things, and what does success mean to me. Like, what does it look like to me? Because it really doesn't look like being sort of the most amazing facilitator in the world, like, and I know these are just, these might be personal expectations, silly expectations, and it's just like letting go, understanding what is conditioning and letting go of that and being like, hey, how do I want to be in service to the world through breathwork? Because there are so many amazing, beautiful avenues that we can do this work in. They do not look like that kind of like, get followers, type of thing. And it's great if you do that. And I love other people that are, pioneering more publicly. It's not going to be for everyone. I'm a huge introvert, and so I don't want to do that.
That's such an important point, because I feel like obviously it makes sense that you see more of people who are more extroverts and go out and build high numbers of followers and stuff, and then you see their stories, and that's what society tells us that what we should aim for, as you said, and then at the same time sometimes we can feel like, is that really what I need or want, or what my path should look like, what I'm actually truly looking for in my life? And I can certainly say that the last couple of months I've done quite a lot of inner reflection in regards to how do I want my life and my business to look like and to grow, and what's my goal also, not just for business, but with creating my own business. How do I want it to fit in my life, and how is my life, like, how do I want my life to look like, not what does society or capitalism wants my life to look like. And I find that quite interesting, because often I feel like if we speak about our goals, and our goals are not like, I want 1 million followers and an income of whatever, how many millions each year, people start speaking about if we maybe not have the right mindset, or if we maybe just not ready for it, if we need to do more in our work, just because society doesn't believe that it's not for everyone. And that's such your words just made sense in regards to where do I fit in, what do I want. So I am wondering, because you mentioned that question, what does success look like for you? What does it mean for you?
Lovely question. And I also just feel called to say as well, the individuals that are pioneering breathwork and sharing it in the world in that kind of format. I just think that that's so wonderful that they're using the system to make it work and to share breathwork. And I am with them and I'm cheering, and I think the question as well is like, just where is the representation of what, like for students up and coming to graduate, for being breathwork facilitators, where is the representation kind of in social media, I guess, or advertising of like what else it can look like, especially, for example, that one thing I always knew, which does lead into the answer of your question, is what does success look like for me? One thing I was always very clear on, I didn't want to be under my own name. As a breathwork, yes, as a breathworker, but not as a company. I wanted a brand. Sounds very commercial, and another word came to me the other day that was much more easy on the ears than brand, and it was yummy. And the word doesn't come to me right now, but I should have written it down. Meaning that grounded life is an entity of itself. It's actually not about me. Like, I want to put my energy, I want to create it as a business. I want to share the work with people. I want it to be a co-creative and collaborative umbrella organization where we have had lots of different facilitators come in and out. When we used to do a lot of live workshops, musicians and different space holders, and also so myself and Hannah co-run it, but we get to do what we want. So Hannah can go off and do her stuff, I can do my stuff, we come together for our trainings and for our courses. So we've had to make this up as we go along, because it's like, well, what do we actually want? Well, we need the freedom to be able to do our own things, but we want to come together because there's more energy in that, and we're so aligned in our values around grounded life. So grounded life is like our compass, And so that was one thing that was very, very just clear on personally, is that to just have like Hannah Goodman, the breath worker, would have felt a little bit too much, and to really invest the energy on building something here that we could all invest in and that isn't so identifiable with me, with my flaws, and being just the human that I am, to just actually create the work and to represent the work and name the work. And so for me, success, I don't even really like the words, so so you might have to think of a new word that incorporates what success might feel like, which could be, I guess, fulfillment, motivation, satisfaction, like feeling in line with your purpose, feeling in flow, feeling just like ecstatic, of the work that you're doing, is, I think, just working in community, in co-creation with others, and seeing the shifts that we're making, I think, on a more collective level. Definitely personal, it began with, and you see the transformations of people after one breath work, like, this is amazing. And now it really has shifted to a more societal, cultural, collective level. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Just picking up another thing you said a bit earlier about conditioning and like letting go of conditionings that we learn through our upbringing, our society. Is there anything particular that you worked on in the past where you could, like, again, successfully let go of a conditioning that wasn't working for you? Or is there anything particular that you're working on at the moment where you feel like that's something maybe society says, coming back to the example of success, but doesn't have to be, that's what it looks like, but I'm letting go of it, or I'm working on letting go of it at the moment?
It's a really big question, and it's actually everything. I couldn't tell you what was my conditioning and what wasn't. Okay, you might be able to, there's some like severe conditioning over here, and there's the I don't know, the polarity over here, but where they meet, it's like there's no way I could say where that conditioning ended and where my individualism as a human being began. It's so interconnected. So the kind of most intense and liberating and interesting, and what feels like just a real responsibility as well, the work that I'm doing at the moment. And I know that Sujiwa from Breathing Space also was talking about the forest garden on her podcast, is the work that I'm doing with the forest garden at the moment. The founder of the forest garden, Hannah Goodman, this is kind of birthed this, and myself, Sujiwa, and Shalini are like part of a core group that really put our time and energy into bringing this out. And it's amazing, but it's basically about decolonial healing, right? And that goes very much into systemic conditioning, cultural conditioning. All I can say is that it's absolutely woven in the fabric of everything. And so that's a really, feels like a really impossible question to give a succinct answer to. But I felt like it was a good moment to introduce that work, because the amazing quote comes to me of, or the saying of, it's not the shark in the waters that, like, so it's not like the specific things, these big things that are looking sort of like the conditioning, it's actually the water itself. And so it's the water that we swim in, it's the air that we breathe, so really looking at our conditioning. That's just, I understand it's going to be a lifelong bit of work, but in every unpicking of thread that we do this, okay, for example, traits of colonialism I'm finding equate to perfectionism, being defensive, inner critic, and I started really looking into this of like, does my inner critic, could it have something to do with the conditioning, with the structures that we live in, just like this success is over there and you need to go from A to B situation, which works for some people. I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying it's not one size fits all. And I lost my thread, but when we start unpicking it, it's actually so liberating, and you're like, oh wow, I've been living in a really strict construct that I wasn't aware of, and just like breathwork, what gives us this also gives us the inquiry into in community, especially with the women in the forest garden, all the members that come, because they have different stories, there are different cultures, different collectives, different experiences, and we're coming together to feel the messiness and the charge of us being together and talking about uncomfortable things like race and marginalization and systems of oppression. But coming back to the choice, just like breathwork, this more information enables more empowered and conscious choice. And that is something that is just very exciting.
Thank you for that. I love that. And I love the work that the Forest Garden is doing. And you're right, we had Sujiva in the podcast a couple of months ago now, and she spoke about decolonial healing and why it's necessary, and how exactly what you just said, how we often don't even realize the water that we are living in, that it's everything. It's not just one tiny bit of, I don't know, capitalism or one bit, but there is our whole structure for thousands of years has been built on something that's still there. Even if we are aware of it, we are often not aware of it in how many areas that actually affects us, because it affects everything. Because yes, if you are in the water, it's hard to realize
that it's the water.
Yes, exactly. I feel like Forest Garden is a really good example of where I want to go with my next question in regards to when you say or the big realizations that come up, and the deep, when you spoke about race or marginalized groups and looking into that and going deeper into these topics, trying to learn more about it and understand more about it so that we can empower ourselves, but others as well. So here comes a big question. How do you do that? Because it is obviously such a big thing. So where do we start? And I'm not asking for a solution for the world, but more on an individual level. When you go,
I don't have it.
I keep asking people who come to my podcast about how do we save the world, on an underlying base, because I feel we need to find an answer quickly. But I feel that's too much pressure on the people, so I try not to. But where I'm aiming at with my question is actually looking at it from an individual point. When I come into conversations like that, even with myself, and realizing, okay, there's another layer to it which needs to be peeled off and looked at, it often feels quite overwhelming, looking at the dimensions, and I often feel quite helpless. And I wonder, where do we as an individual start when we look at our own journey? And as I said, it's not about saving the world, but what do we do for our own journey? Where would you start, or where do you start when you go into those topics?
I would definitely start with the Forest Garden in the means that this is, for me, this is part of my inner work. This isn't a business for me. It's not the return in investment is that it's like any inner work that it's further understanding. And so I'm there as a participant. I help in the background, because it just turned out like that. Myself and Hannah were having conversations about race for the last 2 years. Every week we get a call together and talk about all these things, which does actually lead me to something super important, is in your question around where do we start, where do I start as an individual, is perhaps it's not as an individual, perhaps it's we can't do this individually. And what my eyes have been opened a little bit wider to in recently, or my awareness has been brought to, is the wellness industry does focus a lot on individual healing. So you have an issue with it, or you have a trigger with it, or you feel overwhelmed. That's cool. You need to go and do more inner work. And that's not wrong. That's a beautiful part of it. But you're responding to something that's happening collectively, right? That we're having a conversation and something is happening. So to go off and then just try and kind of fix that on your own, and then to come back, when you're more neutral, when you're more grounded, when you're more capable, when you're more resilient, I have to say, I feel like that might be possibly another part of this system that we live in that might not be serving us, another preconceived thing that we just don't understand, or we're not educated or told or aware that maybe that's not the way to go. I mean, I was actually speaking to Ilamanga yesterday for our inspiration pre-interview that we're both doing. And she said something so wonderful. She said, healing can't happen alone and co-creation can't happen alone. You know, like we need others, we need community in order to do this. There was something else I was going to say, but it kind of left me. Maybe it'll come back.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just going to jump on that point because that's such, and it just clicked in my head where you were speaking about that. And I've read about the concept of like, and I know Forrest Garden has addressed that to the individual versus collective group approaches and how our society often focuses on individual problems and how that might be a problem in itself. And looking at like, the state of the world at the moment, it totally makes sense because we are like so disconnected from each other in many ways, like topics that the Forest Garden addresses with the need of decolonialization, but also like if we look into our connection to nature or how we feel like we're not connected to it because we as humans feel like we can just do whatever we want and how we can get the most out of it. And I definitely don't want to open up the topic of politics too much, but in Germany it feels a lot like we're just trying to get the most out of it for people, and especially richer people who center very much around, or it looks like they are centering much around themselves and their clusters and groups, while it doesn't really matter what happens to the nature or what happens to the world or the earth. And we are in the state where we actually pretty soon are going to see what that means for all of us because we lost the connection between us and nature and earth. And I feel like that's really connected to what you said earlier in regards to we're always focusing on individual healing, but it shouldn't really be about that. It should be more about the collective problem we've got and why it affects basically everyone.
And thank you for bringing that in with nature, because I mean, in my experience, in my opinion, in my view, in my feeling, in my belief, in my trust, you know, we have a lot of pandemics happening in the world, one of which is a mental health, you know, which has been happening for a very, very long time, but seems to be, in my kind of awareness, getting worse within people, like especially people of privilege, let's say, you know, or Western culture, let's say, as well. And I really believe this has a direct relationship with the further away we are with our natural land and being in relationship with nature. 150 million%, I feel like that is, you know, and yet people can put those threads together, but where is the change around that? I mean, you know, I would love to have a conversation about, how could we change the world if we could just, you know, wave a magic wand to be done? And I don't think it can ever be as simple as that, because I don't think humans are simple. I don't think there's ever been a utopia where we all just kind of all loved each other and got on. But I am excited about our evolution. And I don't mean evolution, I was thinking about this earlier, I don't mean evolution in the way, again, of like this kind of linear, we started here, we're here, and now we're going to evolve and ascend, which, you know, might also be part of it and part of the truth. But for me, when I feel about evolution, I feel things like the widespread understanding and implementation of trauma integration, like the going back to do the ancestral and to do the ancestral work and bring in the intergenerational and the epigenetic knowledge of, like, you know, what we're carrying forward in each generation, to rerouting, to doing the root work, to, you know, so it's not a line of progression for me. It's like an orb of kind of reconnection in order to remember the old, but to also take in all this amazing new stuff that we have. You know, there's a lot of hope still. We're not all done yet, and I do live in that hope, but I also live in that surrender of, we just don't know. The great mystery is called the great mystery for a reason, I think. But I think we tend to our own garden, and we really live by example. And yeah, you know, the ripples of change, as you know, with breathwork, really do go far and wide.
Thank you for that. I know we've spoken about breathwork and your journey, but since you just brought it up again in regards to the ripples of breathwork, what do you feel breathwork can do for us? What does breathwork mean to you in a wider sense?
Yeah, it kind of means everything, because in my opinion, there is nothing in your life and your body that the breath doesn't influence, or can't influence, doesn't reach, doesn't make an impact, couldn't bring observation, or or give source to, or connect with source, so it infiltrates everything, and that's, in my eyes, very cool. We've just started doing our teacher training, doing our first teacher training. It's absolutely wonderful. And what I also feel is like the responsibility now, with all this extra information from the forest garden, it's like the new level of learning. So at the beginning, it was all about, it was individualized. Like, why am I the way I am in the world? Like, what is my healing? What is my trauma? What is my liberation? What is, health on all levels? And then it became more about like the collective and cultural generational. So as creating and working in partnership with Breathing Space for the training, it feels incredibly important when guiding and supporting these students through what I always call like their Hogwarts journey, because everyone's feels like they like stripping back the layers to connect with just them and their own personal essence, which is their superpower, and they're just like transmission out into the world, which is just such an honor to be a part of. But it feels incredibly important to look at all these things now, like cultural appropriation, like what are our cleansing rituals that we're telling people to just go out and do, and where are the origins? And it just suddenly there's to not have like accessibility and diversity. It's like this little subfolders seminar here, but how does it become actually part of the root of the organization? And I ask these as questions because I don't fully know, I'm slowly threading it in, but, there's a lot of work to do around this, but I just feel it's important, because if we're guiding people to become facilitators, we really need to do our due diligence of like, what am I as a woman in context in my society, like not aware of? What are my unconscious biases? It's like almost just teaching breathwork isn't enough. Like, so the ripples of change, which I do link to what might be my success, is the ripples of change in a more like societal format, like I think comes with then, when you're doing that training, to have conversations about, well, what's a safe space versus a secure space? As a facilitator, can you say, yeah, I hold a safe space. I hold a safe space for everyone. But what if someone came in your space who identified as something that you weren't aware of, and that either you didn't have the capacity or understanding to be culturally like appropriate or gender appropriate, or, so it's like stepping up to really be in the world that we're in, and to be in service, to just really like surrender, like, hey, there's a lot more to learn about holding space than just breathing. I feel like I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but it's because I'm stepping into that teacher role, and I'm like, okay, this is a lot of responsibility, and I want to make sure that I do the due diligence, not just about the breath, but about, that breathwork is actually for everyone. Why isn't everyone doing it?
Thank you for that. And I feel like it totally resonates with me, because I feel like I'm on a similar journey at the moment, like with my facilitator training. And for those people who do wonder, so Hannah from Grounded Life do work with breathing space in, I think your focus is UK, isn't it, at the moment, Grounded Life, or are you?
No, we've got some students in America. We've got one student in America, we've got one in Canada, and then one in Berlin. Yeah.
Amazing.
And then America. Where are we? UK. Yeah.
Where are you guys actually? Okay. Yes, so you guys are working with Breathing Space and have like an English speaking teacher training, and I've got
English speaking, yeah.
Yes, and while I do the facilitator training, the teacher training in Germany, like German speaking. So what I'm hearing from your response is that it's not just about like using breathwork, learning about breathwork, and then feeling like this is a done journey, but actually continuous learning is needed in all areas, and not just about like how does the breath work or influence us, but again, going back to a bigger picture, a collective picture. How can we make it more accessible? How does it influence people differently, and what's needed so that everyone can benefit from it? And that's where it came from, what I feel like I'm resonating with a lot, with like running my facilitator training for the very first time. And I'm thinking, well, like lots of the stuff, exactly what you said, accessibility, diversity. So we're talking about it in a seminar or two, but what does it actually mean for the rest of the time, like for the real moment where life is happening, or work is happening, not just within a seminar, but actually while I'm holding spaces, while I'm creating a course, while I'm offering services, and while I'm just working with people or just being with people. It's not all about work, but in general about while I'm living, actually.
Yeah, and I'm really welcoming the inquiry into that, because it's you think you've done a lot of trainings and education, and the work of breathwork is never ending, because people are still finding out more stuff about it, trauma, and it's an exciting area to be involved with, because it's ever evolving. But in regards to kind of what we're specifically talking about, maybe like the diversity conversation as well, is what I'm also finding, you're always, okay, another part of conditioning, it's all about action, isn't it? Like, you must act. Okay, this is wrong, we must act. And, that's how I feel anyway. And definitely how I grew up, like, this is wrong in the world, I want to fix it. And what I'm really learning with a hard kind of, not slap, but that's the only word that's coming, is like to just shush and listen. And especially in these conversations in the forest garden, I just got to listen. I just got to listen, because it's not me that's going to inform me of actually how what needs to happen in this situation of making breathwork more accessible. So yeah, just using the breath and listening, rather than this kind of conditioned, I'm gonna take the action here, like what wants to happen, and how can I simply just support that by being in the conversations, by doing my own uncomfortable work around colonialism, for example, and sharing the word of inviting people to the conversation. I don't need to be leading it, I just need to be in it.
Yeah, such an important point. Thank you for sharing that. I think there's one other topic I would like to just touch base on. I know we are going like everywhere a little bit, which I really enjoy, and I hope people can get quite a bit out of it, and maybe just be curious afterwards to dive into one or two of the things we just mentioned. But one other thing I would like to mention, because I know and we addressed it a little bit at the beginning, and I feel like Grounded Life is just representing it also, but I know you've done a course around it a couple of months ago, and I do want to speak to you about resourcing and the importance of it. And of course, that's something I'm very much aware of in regards to what we all need, but also feel like there's more space to talk about that, and maybe also something that will help us while we dive into other conversations around more difficult topics about societal conditioning and things like decolonial healing, racism, or the problems in the world. So can we talk about resourcing?
Yes. And even when you say resourcing, it's just a little softening in the body, our bodies are just kind of responding to everything, aren't they? I mean, the conversations about colonialism and race, like there is a certain, something that happens somatically, and then the resourcing, so yummy. And I started going into it a little bit deeper more recently, because I think an observation of how people hold space, how I hold space, I had noticed that a lot more breathwork facilitators were bringing in resourcing at the beginning of a breathwork, which wasn't, in my experience, always there at all. I believe the first time I came across it was with Gitan in the biodynamic breathwork and trauma release school that he is the founder of, and does amazing work. Oh, it's amazing, and him and the team and all his trainers globally. And it's very much about coming from a place of resource rather than activation, because you stimulate and then you integrate. And that feels in regards to trauma integration. And let's say, let's call trauma tension, because trauma, we've been talking about these things for years, right, as kind of in the industry and as breath workers. And what I also become aware of is like our language can separate from people who don't talk about this all the time. So trauma in itself used to be a word that would stimulate a contraction in my body, because you would think of something horrible. And trauma has so, we could talk for hours about what actually trauma is, but let's just call it tension for this purpose, because it just allows us to maybe not get so caught up on that trauma word, because there's lots of different types of traumas, and it's just the nervous system, what is unintegrated within the nervous system, as a very very blunt summary. So you're going into a breath work, it's activating, that's the nature of this breathing pattern. And Gitan used the resourcing in such an amazing way that I wanted to start bringing it into the beginning of my breathworks. Started doing this for quite a long time and noticed other breathworks were doing it as well, which is great. The question then came to me, because you have a very limited amount of time at the beginning of a breathwork. Find a place in the body, soften in, find a place that feels good, centered or grounded or, yummy, and let that be your place of resource for your breathwork session. So if at any point you feel overwhelmed, you can come back to this place to take a time out and to regulate your nervous system. But the question came to me of and actually it was through feedback as well from breathers, but I can't find anywhere that feels good in my body. I'm not even connected to my body. So now you're asking me to do this and I can't even do it. And I feel like I'm doing something wrong, So it's so intricate, and, we have to be so mindful of where everyone is. And so going more into resourcing is let's just go back and start at the beginning. Let's just look at how we actually connect with our bodies, the relationship that we have with our internal spaces, maybe the overwhelming, I guess, the building of pathways of sensation. And if maybe you're really disconnected with your body, or maybe you have some really strong, overwhelming sensations within it, and it doesn't feel safe to go there. So the practice of maybe feeling places that are more neutral, that maybe don't feel quite as bad as the other places, maybe a connection to the ground. And then maybe even bringing other things in that are more tangible, your precious things, your photograph, something that's going to stimulate, I guess, a somatic response, which helps to shift more neutrally or into parasympathetic and help to regulate the nervous system. But then there's also the felt sense of it, because when you're concentrating and using a specific part of the body, and that actually feels good. So maybe you've done a gratitude exercise and you're feeling really connected in your heart, and then you're connecting. So we use often the physical touch of the self-touch, which is really powerful. It's so simple. It's so powerful, especially when you're doing it in a conscious way with the breath. And, you're breathing into that space, and that space is going to be fluctuating in some sort of way. It might be getting bigger with the breath. It might, and then you ask a person to describe it in their sort of felt sense. So with this practice, you're building upon the connections in the body, the more neutral places, the more grounded places, and then hopefully over time, the more feel-good places, yeah? And this feels like a really appropriate place to start with breathwork, because what it helps you do then is navigate kind of the more turbulent waters of a breathwork session with a little bit more security of I have my anchor. I have my rubber ring here. I can get out of the water. I have my dinghy. I can get out of the water. Yeah, and I know that we say it and we frame it, and we're very responsible. And we take the breathing very seriously, But to really help people sort of have that access point for those, which are, I think, more than we think, that actually everyone would benefit from connection, even if you're a really deeply connected somatic embodied person. Still those practices are yummy for you. I'm not sure. Did I answer your question?
I think my question was, can we talk about resourcing? So it wasn't really a question because you just did. I love hearing you speak about it. And I feel like I know you spoke specifically about resourcing and breathwork, but I feel like it can be really relevant, and it is really relevant in every other area of our lives when it comes to feeling like our nervous system is activated or feeling like there are some turbulent times, as you said. Like we can also use resourcing as a tool to connect with ourselves and help our nervous system to regulate and calm down in other areas, not just in breath work. So
100%, because the breath is a resource.
Yes.
Depending on how you utilize it. But in conscious connected breathwork, because we're breathing through that open mouth and we're kind of, taking more active breaths, passive exhale, it's creating a sense of stimulation. It's engaging in the sympathetic as well. So, it's not, so outside of conscious connected breathwork, your breath alone can be an amazing resource for you to regulate, but also help it out, bring your attention to where your feet are in connection with the ground, where your hands are touching your clothes and what that fabric feels like. So it really does go into the mindfulness practice. Like there's such an amazing, massive, long, like very old, like people have been doing it for a very long time around somatics. And there's like the Shift Network does like there's somatic courses, and it's always something I overlooked, a bit like meditation, because I was like, it's too slow, and then breathwork catches your attention, and then I almost like had to sort of backtrack of like, okay, actually these are really the foundational, that they're going to make the biggest change in your life, because they're going to help you, they're going to change your day-to-day, and they're going to make sustainable, organic, embodied, empowered change and choice in your life, mixed together with the breath work. So they really feel such an important part of the whole modality.
Yeah. I just had an idea, and I'm not sure if you're up for it. I haven't done that with any of my podcast guests yet, but would you be interested in leading us in a very short breathwork exercise? Can be your favorite one. Doesn't have to be conscious connect breathing, obviously, because I just thought something maybe grounding that can support us, because it came up when you said, like, obviously breath is a resource for us. So I was wondering if you would like to hand us a small exercise that people can use for resourcing for themselves.
Yeah, I'd love to. How much time? It was good to have a bit of structure on these things. How long do you want it to be?
I guess I'm quite open for that, but maybe anything between a minute and 10 is fine. Is that a structure enough? No, that's basically everything.
So a couple of minutes.
Yes.
Okay, like three minutes or something. Okay. So if anyone is listening, or those that are listening or watching this, just make sure you're somewhere that's safe to close your eyes, as in you're not in a car, or you're unlikely to be disturbed in somewhere that you can close your eyes. Otherwise, please watch this at a time when you are. I'm going to invite you to just gently bring your attention away from the screen, and you can do that either by gently closing your eyes or have a soft gaze, whatever you feel more comfortable with. So first of all, what feels really important always before you start any breathwork practice is to don't change anything about the way that you're breathing, but simply bring your attention to your breath. So don't suddenly sit up super straight in the perfect yoga position and start diaphragmatically breathing if you weren't already. Just notice what your natural breathing is like in this moment. Is it through the nose? Is it through the mouth? Gently follow the breath into the body as it naturally comes, and just notice which parts of the body move with the breath. It might be very subtle movement. That might be more expansive. What is it for you? How far does your breath reach down into the lungs? How do the shoulders move, the chest or the back? And if you had to describe your natural breathing pattern now to somebody, to yourself or somebody else, in 3 words or 2 words, what words would you use? Maybe it's light, heavy, or short, shallow, or expansive, deep, smooth, restricted. What words come for you? And once you have them, you can just let them go, because we're going to move into a slight shift of intention where we start to bring the conscious intention of our breath forward. And this intention is to breathe a little bit more deeply and a little bit more into the diaphragm. So I'm going to invite you to place your palms of your hands on either side of your torso, just by the lower ribs. So your elbows are sort of sticking out to the side. To the sides of the torso, so you're making physical contact with just around where the front lower ribs are. Firstly, take your attention to that point of contact and notice what it brings. Is there a warmth? What's the pressure? How does the hand fit to the body? And what is the movement of the body under the hand? Can you sense it through the hand and also with your attention of the body in that area as well? I'm just going to guide you into a breathing pattern that you can use at any time, anywhere, to help regulate your nervous system. So I'm going to ask you, for the purposes of this exercise, to just breathe in and out through the nose only, unless you're really struggling to do that. Then breathe any way that you need to or can, but hopefully it can be through the nose. And I'm going to invite you to first breathe out, just slowly. And then really slowly, gently, softly, but committedly breathe in for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just hold the breath for a moment before breathing out for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathing in again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And breathing out for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So keep breathing in this soft pace, but I'm going to just add a couple of things in. So you keep with your pace. You might not be able to reach 5 points. If that's the case, you go to 3, 4, 5, or maybe you want to go to 6. Find a count that feels good for you. This is not about inducing any breathlessness or anything like that. You want to be comfortable. But bring, on your next inhale, really bring the breath, invite it right down to the bottom of the lungs, so that you're almost breathing into the bottom of the back as well, and the sides and the tummy. Imagine the lungs filling from the bottom. When you've reached your number, and then you're going to slowly, controlling through the nose, just breathe out as well. You don't need to push all the air out here. It's just real soft. Just slow it down, make it longer, but only in your capacity. You can always build from there. Okay, we're just going to do 3 more. So on your next inhale, wherever you are, just bring it right down into the body. Feel the gentle expansion under the hands. Soften the shoulders, soften the jaw. And really enjoy that exhale, like it could last forever. Slow it down. And just coming to your last one. Really make this last one count. Feel the coolness of the air coming through the nose, right down, follow it right down into the bottom of the lungs. Feeling the body move under the hands so softly, intricately, intimately. And we're just going to really savor that last inhale. And then just bringing your breath back to more any pace that you would like, a more everyday pace. And I'm just going to ask you to wiggle the fingers, the toes, maybe rub the hands together, create it up with heat. Maybe place them over the face and the eyes, and just you can blink them open from here. See the light through, get used to that light. When you're ready, maybe just bring the hands down, and we can also just look around the room first as well. We have to come back to the screen. Look around behind your right shoulder, your left shoulder, in your own time. Come back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Thank you for that. That was amazing. And I encourage everyone who has listened until here, but maybe have skipped the last 10 minutes because they didn't want to do a breath exercise, to go back and do it, because it was just really, really nice. Thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you for the invite. It's been so nice to chat to you.
It was, yes. So as a last question, so we can bring our conversation today to a close and give people the opportunity to just stay with the lovely feeling they probably have now after breathing consciously for a couple of minutes. Do you want to tell us where people can find you and learn more about you and find out more about your work as well?
Yeah, thank you. We have a website that has just been revamped. There's still a few snags, as they call it, that need ironing out, but it, fundamentally has information, the main information around how you can breathe with us for free, as in the recordings or the monthly breathworks that we do with Breathing Space on the Thursdays. So that's grounded.life. Maybe the links will go in the comments or something. And the training, our next teacher training, is actually not till March next year, but we've got a great foundation course, online foundation course that is actually a prerequisite to the training. And anyone that does feel the call to be a breathwork facilitator and wants to find out more sort of via myself, then just get in touch and we can have a conversation about it. There's a recent online course around resourcing, which is great for people in training and then anybody as well, because it gives four longer meditations about different ways that you can bring yourself into the somatic also like the word somatic, like what does that even mean? So let's say the sensory, to bring yourself into the sensory relationship. So you could start with things like gratitude or an external object, and then so it's finding different pathways of how to come into the body in a way that feels comfortable. Forest garden, please come and have these conversations, anyone that's interested in that, theforestgarden.org. And then the only other thing that I do right now is School Breathe. And if there's any teachers or parents or children watching this, or anyone, not even that, I mean, we all know children, and they're doing some amazing work, and I'm lucky enough to work with them. So anyone that wants to know about breathing with schools, schoolbreathe.com. Few projects.
Thank you. I will list it all in the notes, in the comments.
Thank you.
So can only invite everybody to check Hannah and or the work she's doing, or the projects she's working on with other people. So and find her. And you're also on Instagram, Facebook, everywhere?
Yeah, Instagram. This has been part of the marketing journey as well. It's like just focus on a couple of things. I was on everything at one point, and it's just for me too much. So I really focus on Instagram. That's where I'm most active. Facebook I'm on, but Instagram feels like where the energy is for me, and YouTube as well. There's lots of good like how-tos and information about the breath, and some guided breathing on YouTube. So actually is also a really good place to start if you're just wanting to find out more without committing to courses and stuff like that.
Thank you very much. I will link that too. Thank you so much, Hannah, for your time today, for all your knowledge and just chatting with me about everything breathwork and non-breathwork related. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Ja, me too. Thank you so much, Svenja. Thank you.
Und damit sind wir am Ende der heutigen Podcast-Folge und dem Flow Talk mit Hannah angekommen. Vielen Dank, dass du bis hierhin zugehört hast. Ich hoffe, du konntest ganz viel für dich aus dieser Folge mitnehmen, aus dem Gespräch, was ich mit Hannah geführt habe. Ich hoffe, dass Hannah dich genauso begeistern konnte, wie sie mich begeistert. Ich finde, sie ist eine unglaublich inspirierende, wundervolle Frau. Und ich habe es schon in dem Gespräch gesagt, ich verlinke dir natürlich alle Infos zu Hannah, wo du sie finden kannst, auf Instagram, YouTube, die Webseite von Grounded Life, aber auch die Projekte, an denen sie mitarbeitet, The Forest Garden und School Breathe. Ich verlinke dir das alles in den Shownotes, sodass du sie finden kannst und mehr von dieser wundervollen Arbeit, die Hannah macht, und von ihrer wundervollen Art mitnehmen kannst. Außerdem, wir haben da im Gespräch nicht drüber gesprochen, aber ich möchte das jetzt an dieser Stelle nochmal ganz kurz einwerfen, möchte ich dich noch auf ein weiteres Projekt aufmerksam machen, an dem Hannah und ich zusammen mit Breathing Space arbeiten. Und du hast es vielleicht schon an der einen oder anderen Stelle von mir in meinem Newsletter oder auf Instagram gesehen. Am 24. September 2022 findet das Inspiration Festival statt. Das ist ein Online-Festival-Event, was ich für Breathing Space und mit Breathing Space organisiere. Und Hannah, genauso wie ich, arbeiten an der Organisation und werden dort auf dem Festival sein, auf dem wir über 35 internationale Breathwork-Experten und Speaker eingeladen haben, die über Breathwork sprechen, über die Kraft des Atems, aber auch über verschiedene Atemtechniken, Atemschulen und wie der Atem ihr Leben bereichert, inspiriert und vielleicht auch verändert und transformiert hat. Das Thema des Inspiration Festival, was ein jährliches Event bei Breathing Space ist Co-Creation. Das heißt, es geht auch darum, gemeinsam mit uns selbst, miteinander, aber auch mit unserem Atem in die Co-Kreation zu kommen. Und neben den 30 Speaker-Sessions mit über 35 Speakern, die wir haben, gibt es die Möglichkeit, an 15 Live-Workshops teilzunehmen, die sich auch alle rund um das Thema Breathwork drehen. Und meine Einladung ist natürlich, dass du bei diesem Festival vorbeischaust, wenn du nur im Ansatz Interesse an Atmen und Breathwork hast und auf der Suche bist nach etwas, was dich inspiriert, dann komm total gerne zu diesem Festival. Es ist ein 24 Live-Online-Festival. Das heißt, wir starten am 24.09. um Mitternacht mit einer Live-Eröffnung und laufen dann 24 Stunden durch. Und es wird mehrere Räume geben auf Zoom, in denen du die Speaker und die Workshops sehen bzw. mitmachen kannst. Tickets sind unglaublich günstig. Sie starten bei $29, also knapp 30 €. Wenn du die teurere Kategorie, die ungefähr $50 kostet, wählst, dann hast du lebenslangen Zugriff auf alle Aufzeichnungen von diesem Festival und ich kann dir versprechen, es lohnt sich so sehr. Ich bin als Festival Director schon seit Monaten an diesem Projekt dran und ganz viel damit beschäftigt, dieses Festival zum Laufen zu bringen. Hannah ist sowohl als Speakerin selbst mit dabei. Sie ist zusammen mit ihren Kolleginnen von The Forest Garden da. Sie wird einen Workshop geben zu The Forest Garden. Das heißt, wenn dich dekoloniale Heilung vor allem auch in der spirituellen Szene interessiert, dann lade ich dich nochmal extra ein, wirklich auch zu dem Festival zu kommen, weil du da die Möglichkeit hast, auch Hannah und ihre Kolleginnen live zu sehen. Aber wie gesagt, es gibt auch einfach ganz viele andere Kolleginnen und Kollegen aus der Breathwork-Welt, die dort auf dich warten. Und ich kann dir, wie gesagt, versprechen, dass es ein unglaublich kraftvolles, inspirierendes, wundervolles Event wird. Und ich möchte dich einfach herzlich einladen, dazu zu kommen. Du findest den Link zu der Webseite, wo du die Tickets kaufen kannst, natürlich auch in den Shownotes. Wie gesagt, du findest da auch den Link zu dem Reroute and Resource Kurs, der Anfang Oktober startet, wenn du da tiefer einsteigen möchtest. Und dann freue ich mich jetzt schon auf nächste Woche, wenn du nächste Woche im Podcast wieder einschaltest, denn wir werden im Podcast quasi an dem Thema von heute anschließen und noch weiter über Resourcing sprechen. Es wird eine Solo-Folge mit mir, aber ich werde dich noch ein bisschen tiefer einführen in die Welt des Resourcings und warum wir eigentlich Ressourcen brauchen, warum die so wichtig sind. Deswegen, ich freue mich sehr, wenn du nächste Woche bei der Folge wieder dabei bist. Wenn dir die heutige Folge gefallen hat und du daraus etwas für dich mitnehmen konntest, freue ich mich sehr, wenn du sie auch mit anderen Menschen teilst, entweder indem du die Folge direkt weiterleitest oder indem du sie auf Instagram oder auf Facebook in deiner Story teilst zum Beispiel. Und dann freue ich mich natürlich auch sehr, wenn du dir einen Moment Zeit nimmst, um den Breathe, Feel and Grow Podcast zu abonnieren und ihm auf Spotify oder iTunes eine Bewertung zu hinterlassen, damit andere Menschen den Podcast auch finden können. Danke für deine Zeit und deine Aufmerksamkeit. Ich freue mich, wenn du nächste Woche auch wieder mit dabei bist und wünsche dir jetzt erstmal noch einen wundervollen Tag, eine wundervolle Woche. Alles Liebe, deine Svenja.